Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. People want their city to be well run, provide excellent services, and do all that with a low property tax rate. Some towns talk about it, but in Edwardsville, Illinois, they do it. Edwardsville is the third oldest city in Illinois, originally incorporated in 1818, but it doesn't look like an old city. During the last 25 years, there's been a population explosion because of the development of new subdivisions and a huge increase in the sales tax base as businesses have set up shop. One of the people who have been there through much of its expansion is the city administrator, Tim Harr. Mr. Harr began working for the City of Edwardsville in 1996 as a construction inspector and project manager for the new water treatment plant. In 1997, he was appointed Assistant Director of Public Works. In 2001, he was appointed Public Works Director and then City Administrator in February of 2014. Today, he and I will discuss what it takes on a day-to-day basis to run a city like Edwardsville, Illinois. Tim Harr, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you.
So, what's it like to run a city day to day? Quick, tell us.
Fun. It's fun. You know, every day is something different. I consider myself more of a coach than I think of anything else, a coach or leader. I have an awesome team of department heads that have been in the business for many, many years.
Well, you used to be one of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were the Public Works Director.
Right.
So talk about what are your department heads? What do they do?
Well, the new Public Works Director I had the pleasure of working with for the last 17 years from the time when he was a very young engineering technician. And so I was able to work with him through the years and mentor him. And you know, he's been through many, many years of not only residential construction, but a lot of our roadway improvement projects and water improvement projects. So he manages that whole process, the streets, the water and sewer plants, that sort of thing, and as well as the building and zoning. Of course, the fire chief, he operates not only the firefighters, but all of our firefighters are EMS certified, so we also run an ambulance service. And then our police department is the largest department by far. We have 43 uniformed officers. The total department is about 60, which includes our community services officers, our dispatchers, as well as we even have the school crossing guards, part of the police department. So we're a full service city in many ways. We have our own cable TV channel, for instance. We have an H&R department, we have a legal department. I'm sure I'm missing something. Oh, Parks and Recreation is a huge department.
Yeah,
actually.
you have a pretty good park system in Edwardsville.
We do. We have, you know, we not only run the parks, we also run the Wildy Theater as part of the Parks and Recreation department. We only have about 11 full-time employees in parks, but we have another 100 or so part-time employees during the summer for our recreational leagues, as well as the people we have at the Wildy Theater. Our backup, our part-timers there, the concession stands, that sort of thing.
So, what's your annual budget for the city of Edwardsville?
General fund wise is about 14 million, and then the regular other funds is another about 20 million on top of that. So it's about 35 million. Yeah.
So it's a pretty big business. I mean, if you were a business, 35 million a year, that's pretty good.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. So now, of course, I was a student long ago at SIU and got to know some of the people in city government of Edwardsville,
right,
way back. And it wasn't such a big operation in those days. You know, pretty much the aldermen ran. You know, they ran that, you know, at a much closer, you know, out of their hands, along with the mayor. And there wasn't a city administrator in those days.
Right.
What's the difference between having the mayor run the city and then the changeover to where there's a professional called city administrator? What does a city administrator what's the training difference?
Right. Well, first of all, I think I can attribute the reason for going that direction is because simply the growth and the size of the city. When we were a smaller community of 8,000 or 9,000, and you had a very strong mayor in place, and homegrown aldermen who knew the city very well, they could manage that city and that progress, because certainly we had a lot fewer employees. Nowadays, our population, we're right around 26,000. We have about 250 employees on payroll. Now, about 160 of those are full-time, the rest are part-time. So you need things in place to manage it like a big business now. And one of that obviously was the role of the city administrator. And I had the benefit of working with Ben Dickman for 13 years.
He was the original.
He was,
right.
Yes.
When they first went to the city administrator, or is it city manager?
City administrator.
City administrator. What's the difference there, or is there?
If you Google it, there's all different types of definitions. It's really what the city wants it to be. In our case, I'm the chief administrative officer. In some other cases where you have a city manager, you may have a very weak mayor form of government where the city manager is making a lot of the decisions on large things, whereas we still have a city council that votes. The mayor does not participate in a vote unless it's a tie. From that perspective, we move forward with large projects with the city council as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So is it the fact that the mayor and the city council, which are all elected, they make the decisions about what direction they want the town to go in, and then they turn it over to the city administrator and say, go forth.
Right.
Make it happen.
Exactly. That's accurate. We depend on the mayor and the city council for setting the tone for how they want us on an annual basis to do things. And a lot of that has to do with the budget process itself. So for instance, when I was public works director, I would request certain funds for projects that were either became high priority in the eyes of the city council, or that were necessary in cooperation with, say, a state project. So once you establish that budget, you really establish that year's worth of work. Mm-hmm. So that's generally how it goes. And then again, the politicians, the alderman, the mayor, they're all part-timers. You need someone there on a day-to-day basis, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, to be there to coach those department heads.
Now you, the City of Edwardsville, I should say, you have your own water source and your own water system, right? You're not dependent on, like so many other towns, on Illinois American or over in Missouri American. You actually draw your own water, and you are your own water business, right?
Right, absolutely.
Talk about that. What's the scoop with that?
Well, it's a complicated business in its own right. Our water and sewer are enterprise funds, so they totally operate within themselves.
So you also do sewer, too?
Yes, we have our own sewage treatment plant as well. From the water perspective, you are able to control your destiny somewhat with the fact that you can set rates to balance out the budget. You're not setting rates, you're not paying somebody's rate because of what they might be doing in another part of the state. So when we have large investments, like we've invested, over the time period I've been with the city, probably $18 million in water treatment, whether it's at the water plant or whether it's the water distribution system. So, we've borrowed money in most cases to do that work. We've established rates that would pay that money and pay that debt service back. So that's all with our control, and we can plan, quite frankly, 20 years ahead on where we need to be in the future for water and sewer.
And you have a stormwater system as well?
We do, stormwater collection system.
And okay, so Edwardsville is an old town.
Right.
Okay. And much of its infrastructure was established in the early part of the 20th century.
Right.
Has much of that been upgraded since then? Or is it still 100-year-old infrastructure?
Oh, we certainly have some 100-year-old infrastructure. We have some water mains that are cast iron pipes that are well over 100 years. We've replaced a lot of it. And then in the early 70s, at one time we had a combined stormwater and sanitary sewer system. That was disconnected because of EPA rules and changes and stuff. So there are probably a few occasions where we still might be treating storm sewer.
An overflow system?
Right, right. But we've made a conscious decision in that respect because of the complications with taking that stormwater off of the sanitary. You know, whether it's in the middle of the downtown intersection, that would be very, very cost prohibitive.
Yeah, you're digging through Main Street,
Exactly.
that might be disruptive, especially
Right.
since that's Illinois 159 as well.
Correct. So we made that conscious decision then to, in those small cases, to treat that stormwater at our sewage treatment plant. So, you know, you don't want to overburden your plant with stormwater if you don't have to.
And roads, I remember that former Mayor Niebuhr was like so proud of how in the older sections of the city that the city had over time really upgraded all the roads and sidewalks.
Right. Well, you know, he and the city council and in fact Mayor Patton too have made a conscious decision on in reinvesting in the older neighborhoods. You can only do that really if you have growth and you have revenue. So although there are many who don't like the growth, who don't like all the new subdivisions that we've had, those high-end homes pay a lot of property taxes. And that money has gone towards rehabbing the older established neighborhoods for streets as well as sidewalks.
Edwardsville has grown, I mean, in its physical size, I mean, it's I don't know, double, triple, quadruple what it used to be, say 1970 to what it is today. But then there have been a whole series of places that have really annexed enormously. I mean, used to be there was distance between Edwardsville and Glen Carbon.
Right.
Now you can't even tell, you know, do I live in Glen Carbon, do I live in Edwardsville?
Right. Yeah, our Home Depot and their Lowe's is only separated by a Madison County bike trail. That's how close we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And Troy, of course, has grown to touch some of that area
Right.
down Goshen Road, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's so you know what that leads to is better cooperation between communities. You know, we do have an agreement with Glen Carbon for a boundary agreement, if you will, for where we can annex and where they'll annex. So we've kind of drawn a line in the sand that both communities.
And Troy?
Glen Carbon is really closer to Troy than we are, but they have done a similar agreement with Troy.
Mm-hmm. And you still have a lot of room out to the north, though, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty much still farmland.
It is.
Out that way, so there's plenty of room to grow.
Yeah, I mean, there's some folks over the years who have exaggerated and said that we'll be bordering Hamel before it's all said and done. I think that's very much an exaggeration. I don't foresee that happening, but we certainly do have room.
Well, this is still the early part of the 20th century.
You're right.
So,
You're
or
right.
21st century. So who knows by the time we get to 2050 what things are going to look like.
Right.
Holiday Shores, what's their relationship to Edwardsville?
You know, other than the physical locality of it, there's no real relationship. We used to supply water to Northeast Central, who supplied water towards that direction, but we no longer have that arrangement.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah.
Holiday Shores is pretty much an island in itself. I believe that we have a lot of employees that live in Holiday Shores, and we certainly have a lot of folks who come to Edwardsville shopping and eating in our restaurants that live in Holiday Shores. So.
But you supply all the water and sewer to SIU Edwardsville.
Well, the water, SIU Edwardsville has their own sewage treatment plant that they still operate, so we're not involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
The water certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when that water didn't exist going out that way, and then there was, and that's the difference between, I guess, a small town and larger cities, is that a group of guys were sitting in a place called Rusty's, and all of a sudden, out of this, they worked really hard, and then something called the Northwest Water District, or
Northeast Central.
Northeast Central
Right.
Water District just came into being, and I was lucky enough to be sitting there watching this actually happen as a kid. pretty amazing stuff. Perhaps some of the reasons that people aren't happy with the growth is because when you're a smaller community, you have more to say.
True. Good point. Yeah, but I think that our elected officials, our aldermen, and certainly our mayor, they work very hard to being available to their constituents. And they have, I know for a fact that, my experience with the aldermen for the last 18 and a half years, they do pay attention to their constituents.
And Edwardsville has 7 wards?
Yes.
1 or 2 aldermen per ward?
One per ward.
1. So you have a total of 7.
Correct.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's always an odd number when voting.
Right.
So it shouldn't be ties unless
somebody's absent. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's talk a little bit about business and that's meant, because you have this $35 million budget. So
Right.
that means that you've got to have money.
Right.
Okay. Now, a certain portion of that comes from property tax.
Right.
And the rest comes mostly from your sales tax.
Right.
And that's really where all the growth has come from, is in that additional sales tax, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And we've been, and I guess taking everything in perspective, we're blessed that we're the county seat, for one thing. We're blessed that we have SIUE Edwardsville. That gives us 2 very constant entities. That the growth has certainly contributed to the growth. We are dependent on property taxes as well as sales tax, like any other community. We have,
and yet you've been able to keep your property tax rate steady or actually going
Right.
down.
well, and again, that's because of the growth. Had we not had that growth, I think that we would have been forced to raise those rates as well.
But that whole south end of town now, especially around that whole shopping area where the Deerbergs went
Right.
in, what year was that? I mean,
It had to be around 2001, 2002, then we initially were talking with the county and then put an RFP out to develop that property. Right.
yeah,
It's-
because that used to just be, again, just farmland,
Right.
basically.
Yeah, there are many people
There was an old what was it, tuberculosis center
Correct.
out there,
Correct.
which the county sold that land to Edwardsville.
Right.
And then there was a tree farm,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got that as well, and that bumped you right up against Glen Carbon.
Correct. Yeah. It's hard for me to even remember what that looked like before it was developed because it's been so long ago now. But I do remember that. I remember walking through that old tuberculosis center building because we were part of the demolition of that, and wondering what we got ourselves into when I saw how much land there really was, and
All got used.
all got used. I mean, we are down in the Edwardsville portion of that. We're down to one outlot. There are still about 3 outlots in the Glen Carbon part of it, but again, that was a nice partnership we had with Glen Carbon too.
And that's good that Edwards and Glen Carbon, at one time antagonistic towards one another, have learned to live as partners.
Right. Well, we're certainly competing for the same things. The growth, competing for the sales tax, the next grocery store, the next nice store. But we know that we have to get along. And honestly, what's good for Glen Carbon is good for Edwardsville, too, I believe.
Let's see, they've got the Lowe's.
Right.
Right. So that went in, and then all of a sudden Edwardsville had to have a Home Depot.
Actually, Home Depot went in first. So.
Oh. All right. So then they had to have.
Yeah.
their
Well, and
Lowe's.
that's really the nature of that industry. Those 2 businesses in particular love to compete against each other.
Now I remember a time when Edwardsville couldn't even get a Baskin and Robbins to even consider Edwardsville. Now just talk about that. There's something that happens when you get to when you're below a certain population,
Right.
and then when you get, I guess, synergy and you get above a certain population, and businesses want to be there, whereas before they didn't want to be there. What's that all about?
Well, it amounts to rooftops, and I can relate to the experience we had with meeting with the Deerbergs and Capital Land folks who ended up developing Edwardsville Crossing. My predecessor, Ben Dickman, and certainly the former Mayor Niebuhr had had met many times with Mr. Dearberg to try to entice him to build his next grocery store here. And the interesting thing is one of his real estate guys made a comment to Ben early on. He said, "Ben, it's about the ice cream." He said, "Well, you know, we can sell ice cream here too." He said, "I don't know what you're saying." He said, "No, the location of the store has to be so close to rooftops that you can buy ice cream and you can have it home and in your freezer before it's all melted." So
That's an interesting thought.
So that, you know, certainly Edwardsville has been on the radar screen in the St. Louis metropolitan area for a long time, but we had to get to that certain amount of rooftops, so many residential units that enticed them that they could, with confidence, come here and build, and knowing that they were going to do well. And honestly, every restaurant, every store that has opened up in Edwardsville Crossing has commented that this has been the best opening they've ever had. You know, I remember Red Robin. I was really surprised by that their first year in business, they said surpassed any other Red Robin in the country.
That's good. Well, of course, Edwardsville has a pretty good per household income, doesn't it?
Right. It does. I think, though, honestly, per capita, Maryville is probably the highest. It has been for a number of years per capita income.
Well, it's because there's small population.
Probably.
And mostly all new subdivisions over there.
Well, and there will be those that will argue that because of our population numbers include the students at SIUE, that it's kind of, the numbers are twisted.
Oh, I didn't know that. Now here's something. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, that every city or village gets paid by the federal government some, like on revenue sharing, per person. Just explain that.
Well, every tax that the federal government or the state collects, a certain amount of that is reimbursed to communities on a per capita basis.
So the more bodies,
Right.
which is why you include the students at SIU. And
Right.
didn't you annex?
We did.
out
We
there?
annexed all of SIUE a number of years ago.
Yeah.
But, you know, and really when the 2010 census came back, we looked at those numbers and we felt very strongly that there was an error. So you have an option as a community. You can just deal with that error and accept the fact that you're going to get less money for the next 10 years. Or you can do what we did, was spend the money and go after a special census, which we have done. The numbers are still being tabulated, if you will, at the state level. The U.S. Census Bureau has done their bit. The bottom line is that we feel very strongly the number is going to go from 25,400 to 26,500 in population. So that extra amount of population will more, and it's worth it to us because now we'll reap the benefits of at least 6 years of increased income.
And what is the value of an extra 1,000 people?
Wow.
I mean, approximately.
Yeah,
we're not talking millions of dollars here,
Well,
right?
in the grand scheme of things, because when you talk of the various taxing sources, we're probably going to see an increase of 400, 500,000 in the next, because of that. That's what we would have been out if we had not done a special census.
Over a 6-year period.
Yes.
So about 40,000 a year somewhere in
Easily,
there.
yeah. 40 to 100, actually.
Yeah. So we got about 5 more minutes left here. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that relates to Edwardsville that you'd like to talk about or sing the praises of?
Well, yeah, you know, I think that one of the things that you mentioned it earlier about our history of growth over the last 20 years, and it's pretty impressive because I was looking at it just the other day, excuse me, that if you look simply at our permit numbers of what we've done, we've rebounded really well from 2008. We are back this year to numbers we had in 2007 with about $65 million worth of permitting. And that permitting includes single-family homes, it includes commercial construction, it includes, we have another student housing project undergoing right now.
Do you do a lot of apartments in Edwardsville?
There have been, right. I think we've probably just about reached our maximum now with this will be the third student housing oriented apartment
Oh, I didn't mean
complex.
student housing. I'm just talking about just regular apartments.
Yeah, I think we have a good mix. But there are 3 specific projects that were dedicated towards the students. We still have quite a bit of duplexes and apartment complexes. But those numbers are meaningless unless you really look at what that means. And what it means is it's jobs, it's lumber, it's architects, it's engineers all together. That it's the labor,
Property tax.
property
money, too.
taxes. Right? Yeah, you can't ignore that. But so it means a lot to look at those numbers.
Does the state also share revenue back with the cities?
They do, yeah. State sales tax, state use tax. I'm not.
You get, let's see, I don't know, what is the sales tax in the Edwardsville area now? It's like 7.5%, 6%?
It is. It's
something
right around
like-
7.5%.
But you get to keep 1% of that for yourself, don't you?
Well, in our business district, we have actually increased that by 1%. That's where the Dearborg's development is. So we've bumped that up in order actually to pay for some of the infrastructure associated with that development. And it has worked well.
Okay, so does that go into a dedicated fund, or is
It
that?
has, yeah. It's gone into a dedicated fund.
Yeah, like what do they call it, a TDD or something like that, a transportation development district?
Right. This was set up as a business district with the village of Glen Carbon and Edwardsville in order to pay, like I said, for those infrastructure that had to go for that development.
And do you have other businesses that off on the horizon? Maybe you don't want to mention any names, but there are more things coming.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of interest. We've recently, Planet Fitness announced that they will be constructing a new facility in Edwardsville. We have, if you haven't been in the downtown area in the last week, we've seen some demolition of some buildings that have been in Edwardsville for many, many years. McLean's Auto, for instance, directly across the street from the Chop House and right by our city park, was demolished last week to make way for a new 5-story building.
Lawyers?
Well, some, yeah. I mean, that's the rumor. There's certainly, the way it's being designed is that the first floor will be a restaurant. It'll have some other kind of retail mix in it, but lawyers will certainly, I'm quite
Well, there
certain.
seems to be a lot of course, as the county seat, Edwardsville
Exactly.
has a lot of law offices in it.
Right, right. And hopefully we will for many years to come.
Yeah, but of course, what you really want are the businesses where there's transactions, people buy stuff,
Right.
and then you get some sales tax money off of that.
Right, and the nice thing about having lawyers in town is that they do shop and they do eat in restaurants, and so that's synergy, as we talked about earlier.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for being with us
You're
today.
welcome.
I certainly appreciate it.
Okay.
And to those of you who've been watching, I've been speaking with the Edwardsville City Administrator, Edwardsville, Illinois, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube and are far away. This is Tim Harr. He's been with the city since 1996, and he's seen a lot of development. Edwardsville is an excellent example of what cities can do right. As I said, we're on YouTube. Go look us up if you haven't been there before. Thank you, and see you next time.